Hello everybody, welcome to the stream today. Sorry I'm a little bit late, ended up being a little bit crazy. I started a new job on Monday, I think it was, so that's been fun. Been busy with that. I'm working at Luma Pictures now, working on some unannounced feature films, so that's cool. And then also, in case nobody knows, this will be the second to last week of feedback, the way it's going to be now. So we'll do this week, next week the same way. Then I'm probably going to try to take a week break, maybe 2 weeks break, just to kind of refresh and kind of focus up on my job. And then me, Cynthia, and Madison are talking about different things, stuff we liked from this feedback methods, things we didn't like. And so we're probably going to revise some things, play with some things, try some stuff new. We're also talking about maybe combining streams and stuff like that. So just keep an eye out, watch and see what we do in the future, but we will still continue to do feedback and stuff like that. But we're just taking what we think people are liking, disliking, and kind of going from there. So that's just a quick little update. Also keep an eye out for movies that are coming out in the future, because my name will probably be in them. So let me grab my, where'd my pen go? Oh, I'm dumb. Hold on one second. I misplaced my pen. Will we have a pinless stream? Hey Ub, hey A to the J. Hello Kane, Sanjana, Animation Addict. Hello everybody. Welcome to the stream. As usual, I'm a dum-dum and I left or forgot or dropped my pen somewhere, so I'm looking for it. Okay, where on earth did I put it? Maybe it dropped behind my desk. Well, looks like we may be having a pinless stream today. I guess we'll see. But I'll at least watch through and see if there's anything I need to draw that I can't without my mouse, and we'll go from there. All right, so first we're going to look at Sanjana's shot, and then we're going to look at Kane's shot. So give me 1 second here. Okay, tell me if you guys can hear the audio on this. Or I guess there is no audio, never mind. That makes it easy. Nice. Nice. Let me see what your notes were on this. Okay, so basically timing notes and if things are reading. So I think everything is reading, but again, I don't know what your mentor has said about it, but my first thought is that it's very, very long. And just for the fact of completion, 900 frames is a lot to tackle, even if it's cartoony, which, you don't have to struggle with like the body mechanics as much because it's kind of pushed realism, whatever. That'll make it a little bit faster, but 900 frames is going to be a lot to animate. Because, like, even like someone like me that's kind of like known in the industry for speed, like I've done a lot of fast work, and even on Kana I was animating about 700 frames a week. The longest personal shot I've ever animated was about 650 frames. Now that it did have 3 characters. Wait, is it at a wrong frame rate? What's sync sketched? Oh, it's at 60 frames per second. That's why. Hold on. Did you play Blast at 60 frames per second, Sanjana? If that's the case, 60. So that would mean... you play blasted at 60 frames per second. Okay. That's why. So in actuality, it would be 902 divided by 60 would be 15 times 24 would be, yeah, about 360 frames. Okay, well, that's perfect then. 360 frames, easy peasy. That should not be an issue at all. Yeah, I don't know why Sync Sketch is playing it at 60 frames per second. I don't know if you play blasted it or not, but yeah, 350 frames, that'll be perfectly fine. Cool. Now let me watch it again. So what I'm thinking for the very first beat, I do agree that it feels a little bit rushed. And I think the reason is because he wakes up, he's all sleepy, he's moving kind of slow. But then for seemingly no reason, he like grabs the alarm clock and is like, what's going on? Even though clearly from the fact that it's ringing, the fact that he's like waking up shows that he doesn't know that he's late for work yet. And so until he sees the clock, he shouldn't be moving very quickly because he doesn't know that he's late for work yet. So what I would try is like, alarm clock is ringing, he wakes up, he looks over, then he grabs it quickly, right? Because he's like, are my eyes deceiving me? Am I like blurry vision? Like, can I see, is that actually 9 a.m., right? So he like wakes up slow, looks over, what? And then he does that. I feel like that's going to clarify the beat a little bit because right now it's like he wakes up and then it's like, boom, what? So it kind of reads as a little bit weird to me that he's freaking out before he even sees the alarm clock, if that makes sense. So the way I suggested is one way to fix it. The other way is just giving more time to where he wakes up and then he like slowly grabs it, looks at it, and he's like, what? And maybe he can do like a take or something. Or he's just like looks at it and is like, what? And then he runs. Like that's also another way, but that'll add a little more frames because you're adding like a longer time, like grabbing and looking. So either way, I'd try to do that. cool. I can't say for sure because again it's at 60 frames a second, but I think you can make this section a little bit faster. It just feels like the smear frame is lasting a little too long in my eyes. And so I think you could speed that up a few frames. It would be nice if he's wearing like pajamas or something here. If he goes off screen, sorry, you see like objects flying, like he's like throwing his clothes off and getting into his suit. So like maybe he has socks on his feet, or maybe he even has house shoes on. Like I don't know why he'd have house shoes in bed, but maybe he's just kind of, different and he just likes having house shoes in bed. But it would be nice if like he could be wearing something, even if it's like a stocking cap or a shirt, pants, socks, whatever. And then as he's like runs off screen for a few, like for maybe one beat, and there's like pieces of clothing flying in from off screen. I think that could be just like a fun like beat. And then also technically if you wanted to tie it in with something else, you could have that be what he trips on here. Like I know like he's putting on a shoe and that's what causes him to trip. But alternatively, if he is throwing like pieces of clothing onto the floor, maybe whenever he's like walking back in, like that piece of clothing gets stuck on his foot and that's what like causes him to trip. Like that could be kind of fun if you wanted to do that. And then off. Another thing I would try, because you have a fair amount of like dead space after here, so that would be almost an entire second you have of dead space after the shot. I would try to like remove some of this and maybe add a little more to, hey Cadriano, how you doing? Add a little more time to this. Not a ton of time, because I like what you have of like he scrambles off screen and then comes back in. It might be nice if you maybe added like 5 to 10 frames of him being off screen, just so we have a little bit of time for our eye to adjust to him being gone and maybe go back to the briefcase, right? Because we're watching this story unfold before our eyes. So we're like, he's in bed. Okay, he goes off screen. Okay, he comes back. He's dressed now. Okay, he goes over here. Oh, he's putting his shoes on. Okay, now he's brushing his teeth. Okay, now he runs out. And if you don't give him long enough being off screen, we're not going to connect the dot in our own mind of, oh, he forgot his suitcase. So I would try to give him just a little more time. That way when he runs off, the audience can be like, oh, there's the suitcase. He left it. And then he can run in and grab it. So just maybe like 10, 12 frames. Like play around with it and see how it feels. But like 10 to 12 frames of him being off screen before he comes back in. But other than that, like I really like your poses. I think they're all like super dynamic, super graphic. Yeah. That was the one thing that my parents always told me, is like, don't run with a toothbrush. You're going to fall and it's going to like choke down your throat. So whenever I saw that, I was like, don't run. You're going to choke. Digital painting with Justin, storyboarding and term B. Nice. I'm doing well. I don't know if you were here, Cadriano, but I said I started a new job at Luma. So I'm working on feature films. And if you look at what they've worked on in the past, you can probably guess what they're working on in the future, which is what I'd be working on. So some super cool stuff. I've been planning on hopefully taking a class sometime soon. I don't think I ever want to take storyboarding just because I'm terrible at drawing, but in my line of work, because of my side job, side business, I would love to either take sculpting and or rigging, because I'm much more of a technical person, and I feel like knowing more about rigging, which I already know a fair amount, but being able to actually build facial rigs from the ground up would make me a lot more efficient as a lead, telling people how to make facial rigs for my characters. So maybe one day in the future I can do that. Thank you. But I thought about taking Anim's school rigging course, but apparently there's some sort of weird laws now where certain states in the US cannot take Anim school, actually, which is very weird. But I guess maybe if I want to take it, I'll have to move to a different state for a little bit. But let's get back to this. Let me make sure there's no other notes that I saw that I think could change. I like your posing. It all is clear, super cartoony, which is nice. Yeah, the accreditation process. Because I know that used to I could take it before they became an accredited school, but now that they are, there's like laws within my state that prevent going to online schools from other states, which is very, very weird. Yeah, I think everything is super solid. You're in a great spot to start your first pass blocking. Federal aid guidelines. I don't know if it is about federal aid, because like I've read the documentation on it, and essentially from everything I can read, there's like for Oklahoma, which is where I'm at, and several other states, there's some sort of state legislation that's been passed that says that to protect the citizens of their state, they passed legislation to prevent essentially people in Oklahoma going to online schools outside of the state that are accredited, which I don't exactly understand the reasoning behind that. I really haven't done enough like research, because like the thing is that I know for accredited schools you can do like FAFSA and stuff like that, but like for people not using government aid to go to accredited school, there should not be legislation preventing people from going to their school of their choice. But I'm guessing it has something to do with wanting to facilitate in-state colleges and have people go there for online schooling as opposed to out of state. I'm not sure. Like I'd have to look into it. But on the face, it seems very odd. But anyway, so I think you're in a great spot, Sanjana. I really don't have any posing notes because, like, obviously it'll take a little bit transferring the 2D drawings to 3D. But I think the poses on their face are super, super nice. So I would say just get a first pass blocking, and hopefully I can see it next week, because it'd be great to see a first blocking pass on it, because it's going to be a super fun shot. A VP address would work, kind of, but I just have to see, like, they're not, they wouldn't be tracking my IP. The thing would be like admissions. So like I'd be having to pay them money from my bank, which would be in Oklahoma. I'd have to give them a home address, which I'm sure they'd probably have to verify at some point. So I'd have to find a home address that they could either mail or check out. Like, I don't know exactly what their verification process is, but I do know when I looked into it, they said in order for you to go to Anim school, you have to verify your address, and it has to be verified in a state that they can give schooling to. So I don't think it's quite as easy as just getting a VP address. So, but with that, let me check. Cool. I just got the fully uploaded link. Okay, bear with me here. I'm going to download some things super quickly. Download. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and look at the cane shot. I'm also going to open it up in Maya, but I'm going to go ahead and look at it in Sync Sketch. Use Aang. He looks really young, so my mentor told me to go with Jules. Is there any other rig that would be good? The toy rig is super cartoony, and honestly, he looks older. I'm not a big fan with the licensing method they have. It seems super complex and confusing, and you can't just buy it outright. You have to like essentially pay like a monthly or yearly fee for it. So the toy rig is cool. I think his proportions are a little bit weird, but for a cartoony shot, I think it would work great. Other than the toy rig, what other rigs? Let me check something. Let me check something real quick. Okay, what's going on here? There's the long winter rigs, which you could technically use. I don't think any of them are super body mechanics friendly rigs or character design. They're a little bit clunky. Gabriel Salas's rig, I would definitely not recommend. They just have too many body issues. Like, I've seen people. I think it's pretty solid, actually. Let me look. Where am I? Let me see. Toy rig Maya. I think I've seen his facial rig before. So this is what his controls look like. Like, I think he's like a super cartoony rig, which means like you can get these really nice graphical shapes. Obviously, if you're trying to go with like a more like intimate performance, I think you probably won't be like if you're going for a subtle shot, I would not suggest using this rig. But I think for a cartoony shot, I think this would be great. And it's a lot simpler of a facial rig than like Jules, which means it's easier to get like a couple like super pushed appealing shapes and then just leaving it at default. Because that's like the big thing that I have a problem with Jules, Aya, Shaman, not so much, but Overlord, Jules, and Aya. They're fairly flexible rigs, not as flexible as I'd like. But their character design is such a way that you have to sculpt appeal out of them. And if you're doing a body mechanics cartoony heavy shot, you really don't want to have to spend an hour, 2 hours sculpting your facial poses to look appealing. You want to just put them in poses that are already appealing and just make them like do what you want to do. So for Toy Rig, he looks fairly cartoony, but he looks appealing from default. So if you want scared, you just open up the eyes, you give him a scared look on his mouth, and you're good. With Aya or Jules, you're going to have to sculpt the eyes to look a certain way. You're going to have to make sure that they look appealing from that angle. You're going to have to sculpt them to look good towards camera. All of those things, it's just too much work, in my opinion, for a shot that's far out that you don't need that many facial controls for. So that would be my suggestion. Is if you can, I would go probably for the Toy Rig, or I can't think of any other good like body mechanics rigs out there that are like older. If I think of any, I'll let you know. But off the top of my head, Toy Rig would probably be a good bet. So with that, let me check and see if I've got downloaded. Cool. Show folder. Extract. Cool. Now let me open up Maya. Okay, let me watch this shot first, and then I'll open it up in Maya and go over some notes. Can you guys hear the audio on this?
Let me tell you something. I've killed more people than you've had hot baths. I am the angel of death. I am Abaddon.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm a one-man euthanasia clinic. Only with me.
Ah, thank you, Alan.
To Switzerland. Let me tell you something. I've killed more people than you've had hot baths. I am the angel.
Are you not able to hear the audio, Kane? Let me try to remedy that. As usual, I left it muted. Oh, you can. Cool, cool, cool. Okay.
Angel of death. I am Abaddon the Destroyer.
Cool,
I'm a
cool.
one-man euthanasia clinic. Only with me, you don't have to go to Switzerland.
It's probably a little too loud. There we go.
Let me tell you something. I've killed more people than you've had hot baths. I am the angel of death. I am Abaddon the Destroyer. I'm a one-man euthanasia clinic. Only with me, you don't have to go to Switzerland.
Nice. So as for the idea of the bubbles, I think if you're going to do the bubble idea, I think you'll need to make the bubbles relatively smaller, almost like this. And you'll need to have the bubbles coming up at different speeds, and you'll need to have enough of them coming up. Because right now, just having one bubble come up feels like, at first I was like, what is that? Is that a pearl? Like, obviously it needs to be transparent, but I think it'll be sold much better if you have like multiple bubbles, like all coming up, and you have enough time to read that, oh, he was hiding in a bubble machine. So that would be my suggestion if you want to go with that.
Let me tell you something. I've killed more people than you've had hot baths. I am the angel of death. I am Abaddon the Destroyer. I'm a one-man euthanasia clinic. Only with me, you don't have to go to Switzerland.
Cool. So let me open this up because I have a couple ideas I want to go over, and I think it'll be easier to do inside of Maya itself. Open up. Oop. I need to extract. There we go. Treasure chest. I don't need the rock. And I don't need Yulon. And I do need the arowana rig. Cool beans. I've actually never opened up this octopus rig, so this will be fun. I do have experience working with rigs that have multiple legs, but I've never used this rig in particular. Quick question about ANO1. I'm taking Tim in January, wondering if you have any suggestions on books. Start reading. I already have Animator Survival Kit, Illusion of Life, and a lot more. All good, Kane. What do I have for suggestions? Honestly, not so much for reading, because personally I'm not a big reader. I don't know if I'll be canceled for saying this, but I've actually never read the entirety of Illusion of Life or the entirety of Animator Survival Kit or any animation book, to be honest. I don't like reading books very well. If you're a big reader, the books that I own are Cracking Animation by Aardman. I have The Illusion of Life. I have Animator Survival Kit. I have Simplified Drawing for Animators. I have The 5 C's of Cinematography. I have Directing the Story with Francis Glabus, which is an amazing book. I read the first chapter, 2 chapters, and was awestruck by it, but never made time to finish it. Like, if there was one book I would ever finish, it would be that book. Because I'm very, very interested in telling a broader story, not just animating pixels, but making those pixels tell a story. So, Directing the Story with Francis Glabus is an amazing book. I just have not made the time to finish it. What other animating books? Cartoony Animation. Trying to think of what other ones. There's a lot of good books out there. Honestly, if you want a good list of books to buy, I believe the Pratt Bros in their description of their Twitch channel has a great book list. But for someone who's going into ANO1, personally, my suggestion, what helped me the most, was use the AM resources. AM has an entire library, hundreds of videos of professional animators literally telling you how to animate. And if you go into class 1 and you've watched half the videos on the AM website, you're going to be in a perfect spot to succeed. Like, if you they basically break it up into different categories. So you have drawing category, and they have all kinds of resources on how do you do drawing, how do you do posing. Then you go to the next one and you have animation basics, and they take you through all the basics of animation. And then they take you through all the body mechanics, all of those things. If you get all the way through body mechanics before you even start the basics class, you're going to have such a strong library of information and knowledge before you even start practicing your basics that you're going to be way, way, way better off. My second tip for somebody starting in class 1, and this is a big tip that I think is a massive issue that AM has in their curriculum. Do not pose your class 1 poses off of your sketches. Never do that, ever. Yes, watch all of Drew Adams' videos. They're amazing. But, hi, Kubasek. Oh, do we need to block someone? Oh shoot, how do you... I always forget how to block people from the stream manager. Madison, if you're there, can you block this person that's posting links? Anyway, so back to what I was saying. The biggest issue that I think all class 1 students that do this go into is they don't know how to draw super well. AM in the curriculum says, okay, go find people that are moving, draw poses off of those people, and then pose your poses off those drawings. And for me, that is a massive pitfall that I see a ton of people doing. Because if you're like me and you just have average or below average drawing skills, you're not going to have any information on how to pose a pose. And if you're in class 1, you do not know how to pose a body. You don't know how the hips are going to work. You don't know how the chest is supposed to work, the arms, none of that. You don't know any of that information. And so if you're trying to pose all that information that you don't know off of a drawing that looks like a stick figure. Oh, thank you, Alan. Let me do that. Backslash. For some reason, it's not working. Oh. I found it. Thank you, Alan. That's super helpful. Now I know how to ban people. Okay, anyway, so back to my rant. If you're trying to pose things off of low resolution, low detail drawings, you're going to build very, very bad habits in your posing. What I suggest is, yes, do your thumbnails, do your drawings like they say. But as soon as you go to do your class 1, class 2 poses, pull up the reference picture that you use to draw the images and pose off of that picture. Because you're going to get way more knowledge, way more information on how to pose a body correctly and anatomically by seeing a character with anatomy and poses and like bones, skin, muscles. You're going to know how to pose a body off of that way better than a little tiny little thumbnail that you did. So that's my biggest advice for somebody in class 1 is pose off of pictures, but still do your thumbnails to learn how to pose a body. So that's my little rant on what you should do going into class 1. Hopefully that was helpful. But with that, I now have Myosine open. Yes, that's a great video as well. Aran is an awesome dude. We love him. So anything that Aran does is going to be awesome. So I highly recommend. Okay, cool. Layouts, 2 panes side by side, shot cam. Also, Kane, I totally forgot. Is there any way you could send me the audio file super quick just on Discord? It should be small enough that you could just pop it over to me on Discord just so I have the audio. Okay. Okay, so what's being animated here? So an idea that I had for the fish, which I think could be funny, is if through the entire shot, we're seeing him swim through. So if this is my shot cam, let me go ahead and switch the render settings on this to 1280 by 720 and turn my display to, there we go. Maybe about there, and he can like swim from behind. Oh, that is way too fast. Yeah, that's too fast. Okay, let me go ahead and delete this super quick. Actually, delete everything but this frame. And then let's take, how does this work? Interesting. So I can let's go ahead and pull him back over this way. Cool. Thank you so much. So I'm going to download this. Open show in folder. Just drag and drop it here. Cool. That works. Let me turn it down a little bit. Oh, I'm gonna have to check and see if it's offset. Nope. Cool. So anyway, hopefully you get... No, you're good, Kane. So basically what I'm going for here with the tentacle grab is I think rather than grabbing it coming towards him, I think it'll be funnier if it grabs away from him. So it's like trying to get away from him almost. Because if you're selling the idea of like, which kind of goes to the question you asked of, should the fish be minding his own business or should he be like scared of him? I think kind of both. Like, I think if we set up the prank of he's swimming around in the tank and then he accidentally swims too close to him, and as he's swimming away, he just like grabs him. I think that's a little bit funnier than like him swimming towards him and just like grabbing him as he comes towards his face. Because then it almost seems like the fish is becoming a little too like aggressive and like trying to attack him or something. So this is way too quick. And I don't want him to be seen here. But something like this where he's like swimming around and like whoosh, grabs him here, I think would be super funny. And it would be super nice. And then once you get it here, like that, this can work the same. I keep getting these little notifications and I don't know what they're for. So if I delete this, boop, boom. Cool. So what does this look like? Cool. So something like that I think would be fun, of like setting up the gag of like the fish just like swimming around in the background. Obviously what I have is super rough, but I think that can be fun. Boom. Like that. I think that can be fun. And then the other note I have is sup, Pratham? Bake it to a cube. That's what I say. Oh, so it does have IK. Interesting, maybe. It's a very strange setup for these legs. Very interesting. So essentially, what I'm going for with the posing is I really, really like this posing here for the octopus of all curled up, because I think that's very octopus-like. Once you get into this posing, all of his legs like go out, which makes it super like stretched and a little less like octopus-like. And so I'm going to go through and I'm just going to do a couple poses of like stuff that I think you could do through here as he comes down that I think would be super nice. But let's see. So like here, instead of having all three tentacles like down on the ground, I think you can, again, pardon the posing here because I honestly don't 100% know how the rig works. But you know what? We're gonna go for it. Let's just zero it out. Cool. Actually, you know what? I might try Baby with Ray. Thank you for the follow. Appreciate it. Something curled up like this, something like this. And then taking this. It's probably a bit too broken. What's the best way to pose this out? Taking this one. I'm very confused as to how this posing works. Does this control... Oh, now it doesn't. Interesting. Okay, so if I rotate it in X, it does that. Interesting. Pull this. It started about the same time. Typically, I start at 9:30 my time. So I may have forgot to post on social media. Oops. But yeah, typically we start at 9:30. But now that my new job, one control at a time, yeah, that's what I'm seeing here. It's like the tentacles are not the most pose friendly. So maybe I can look around and see if there's a better way to pose it out. But I may actually move the time forward an hour or two in 2 weeks, depending on my work schedule. But, okay, so is there actually... So if we have this cube, waves number, waves amplitude. Interesting. So if I turn this up, that's kind of cool. Tip bound, control, root influence, roll, volume. Auto stretch. Okay. So I'm just gonna go. That is the jankiest thing I've ever seen. Okay, maybe I would be better off using something like this. Yeah, I get what you mean with like a lot of time wasted, because I'm like, this is a very unintuitive setup, especially for FK, for legs, isn't the most I should be able to praise them. If you can send in the Discord, I can take a look even if you're not here. So I prefer IK for most everything at this point. And for octopus legs, it wouldn't be the most important thing, but I'm wondering if there's a better way. Root influence. If there's a way that you can turn this off. Because this is just sine. Offset? No. So theoretically, if you did that and you did this, and you did the offset. Yeah, this is literally just a sine deformer. Okay, so the problem, I think, is that when you rotate this, it's literally rotating. Which does nothing. Oh my goodness. Okay, what happens if I go parent, child? Constrain parent. Okay, that's not it. Okay, so what if I go parent, child, constrain parent? Okay, I fixed it. Okay. So this may mess up your posing a little bit, Kane, but so what was happening is whenever you move the FK control, for some reason it's moving the IK as well in a really weird way. So if you just take, let's say, this controller, right, the hip control, and constrain this control to it, now this control is locked and won't move when you move the FK. So now I should be able to pose this 800 times easier because I don't have the IK moving at the same time as the FK. Anyway, I don't know if you had that same problem. Maybe I'm doing something stupid, but at least it's working for me now. Okay. Let me go ahead and take these controls and zero them out. And then I'm going to take this weird IK control. I'm going to constrain. That way when I move this one, I can move it without. Yeah, if you want to brute through it, that's fine. I'm just doing this because I don't want to brute through it on stream. But hopefully this will show kind of like what I'm thinking for the octopus. So I'm going to use this, 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 and I'm just going to roll. roll him up. So like that. Take parent, child, constrain, parent. Cool, so now I can move this one. So this control needs to be down. This one needs to be farther up. And then I can just curve these around. So something like this. Pratham, yeah, if you want to DM it to me, I can go through some splining process for that. So. And then for this one, I'm just gonna quickly do that, and then go here. So if you can see, Kane, just like between these two poses, like the difference is I'm just trying to go through and find ways to break up the legs. Because right now, if I'm looking at it, it's like straight leg, straight leg, straight leg, straight leg, straight leg. And for me, and again, this is something that I've gotten notes on before, is that with 8 legs, try not to make them all straightened out, because then they're going to feel like they're walking around like this or like standing up too tall. So like try to have certain legs that are like moving you forward, but also try to have certain legs that are like curled up and like sliding around, and that like slitheriness you get with octopuses. So for me, I think you just get some more like almost like what you have here, which I really, really like. This part is awesome. I love this part here. It's really nice. But trying to get that through the entire shot, I think will be really nice, because like places like here, I think it's just too much like all out with your tentacles. So trying to keep things like this, just like keeping it interesting. And so then like when you're walking, I think you could probably have like almost something like this with the first one. Also, I'm going to do this on this frame. That way I can show the difference. And then for here, I think we can actually have it like this leg up here. Yeah, not that high. Something like this, maybe. And this way, by like getting this right leg out, you can possibly get, oh yeah, we got another one of these. Out in silhouette. I'm just going to, whoops. Pull this over here to get this out in silhouette. Pull this down just a little bit. So anyway, so to some extent, just trying to get like the difference between this, where it's like almost like a starfish, to again like curling the legs, offsetting things, and like making them like walk forward like that. This is good. I like this a lot. Like you have like these really nice curls in the front too. The back ones are curled around. This one's curled up. Like this is awesome. Like I like this a lot. I would suggest like trying to do that more for all of these poses, especially at the first here. Oh, where is it? Again, especially with poses like this where they're like coming down of really like curling those tentacles. And then as it goes for the movement, is this what's moving him around? Is this what's moving him around? Okay. Okay, is there a hip controller that does not move the head? I hope so. No, it doesn't look like it. Is there no follow line? Okay, there's not. So how do I want to do this? Okay, so another note that I'm noticing with your thing, Kane, is that there's no like rotation of the torso as the head stays still, right? So kind of like this of like, if you rotate his entire torso, be seen when he gets like to 300s and 400s. I think some of the back ones could be seen. Like if you have like something here and you have like this one up here curled around a bit. And then like this back one here, maybe you have it. It would be really nice if you were able to translate these as well as rotate. That would give you so much more like freedom. But yeah, something like this cane, I would find more interesting than this. Just because, like, it feels like, you know, you see tentacles and legs moving around. I feel like I like that better than everything just going straight down. I think once you get to where he stops, though, of like, you can have something like this, but then as he comes to like more of a stop, like here, I think you can have his tentacles kind of fall and settle and then come into something more where like all the legs are like down, like this one's down and then this one's down. And you can just have like a nice clean like shape in the body to where it's like he's just going forward. But what I would try to do, which I'm going to try something technical and see if it works. And if it does, then I'm going to suggest it. So bear with me here. Bake it to a cube. Create cube. Modify, match all transforms. Scale. Up, save, copy, bake all keys. Okay, so here's my cube. It follows along perfectly with this controller. Moves the top, but not the hips. Honestly, this would be the perfect control that I was looking for. So I'm going to actually okay, so parent, child, constrain. Okay, that's been constrained, so this moves this, which means this should only move this, which is exactly what I was trying to get. Oh, I need to make this stepped. Okay, so what I'm trying to get at here, Kane, is with this octopus rig, it's really kind of imperative that you're able to some extent, rotate his body and be able to rotate it around with the tentacles moving, almost like shoulders, without having his head and neck move around with it, because then you kind of lose the idea of him being an octopus and like sliding around, because then his head is moving around with, and it's going to look really weird. So basically all I did is, let me just explain this here. Turn, follow, align, blend parent off. Okay, so basically this is just a simple hierarchy to where the hip controller moves everything, right? Everything up above, everything down below. And you can see by the way that everything gets highlighted, right? So this controller, it controls this controller, and this controller controls this control, and this one controls this one. And it's just, it's a simple hierarchy. So what I did was I took a cube. You can use a controller too if you want, and just used Anabot Xform to bake out your keys to 4, right? Every 4 frames, I baked out the keys on this controller, which is just the base neck, to a cube. And this cube is not part of the hierarchy of the head, right? So then once I have the animation that you have here on the cube, I'm going to do parent cube, child neck, constrain parent. So then the neck control is following the cube. So if I want to animate the neck, I'm just going to animate the cube, right? And that's going to do exactly what I want it to do. But then when I go down the hierarchy, hey, Big Tuna, when I go down the hierarchy to the hips controller, I'm able to now rotate the hips and even translate the hips without moving the rest of the neck and the head, because it's no longer part of this perfect hierarchy. That way, whenever he's moving around like this, like, hey, thanks for the follow, Big Tuna, I can still do this, which will not follow. which is kind of a problem. But for now, I'm going to do it. So now he's moving around. No, I'm a professional animator, so if you want to DM me, we can talk about payment or something like that, but I don't do animations for free. I teach, I work professionally at a studio, but I don't take any contract stuff right now. So as he's coming down the chest, it would be nice to have him leaned a little more this way in his rotations. So here is about good. Absolute, there we go. Here. And then as he comes here, it'd be nice if he kind of rotated this way. Here. If you want to do official big business Big Tuna, join the Discord. The link is down below. It's the Channel Box official Discord, and you can just DM me privately, and we can talk about this off stream. So. Cool. So now I'm just gonna key this out to 4s, just so I keep it in line with your blocking. Very quickly. There we go. Obviously, I would refine these curves, but there. So hopefully, Kane, you can kind of see of like what I'm trying to go for, of like almost like hips on a biped, of like being able to animate this separately from the rest of the body and still being able to move his head around and all of that. Link to the Discord. Give me 1 second and I will send that to you. Invite link. Thank you, Kane. Much appreciated. Another thing I want to check is I just want to put this in spline real quick so I can see what the body's doing. try that one. Big tuna. That one should work. I will set this key to stepped. And the other nice thing about this cane is that you can, now that you have these separated, like here, I would try to drag the head just a little bit, of like having like the torso. Oop. Like the head like dragging slightly up as the legs are coming down, which that's more of a spline thing. But if you're interested in trying this, I think it would be worth a shot of just using a constraint method to separate the neck and the hips. That way you can animate the hips separately from the head. I don't know why my audio is not. Oh, it's probably because my playback speed is max real time. Nope. It would be nice if you could get a nice head accent here. What do you use to animate the head? Here's the head. So what I would try to do here is just push how high he goes, like, I'm Abaddon and Destroyer, right? Just pushing up the head a little bit here, and maybe off to the Destroyer, pushing and then pushing this. So if you have Destroy, something like that. So hopefully that makes sense, kind of like I'm trying to get, like, he punches Destroyer so hard, I'm trying to get a little bit more of a pose change. So he's like, I'm Abaddon and Destroyer, right? Because right now you're kind of like, I'm Abaddon and Destroyer, and it's like, it's kind of soft in both areas of the way he says it. It would be nice if it was like, I'm Abaddon and Destroyer. Because then you're kind of like monotone until the very end when you're like, you have to go to Switzerland, right? So I would try to punch that note up a bit. And I might even hold that head pose until like here. Yeah, cool. Nothing much, Price. I'm just going over Kane's shot more. And obviously, this needs to be at stepped mode. Also, I'll go over that afterwards. I'll do this real quick. Yeah, I think that's my main notes on the shot for blocking wise, because like I gave a couple general ones, which I think you'll have to go over, of like curling the legs more, going through and like adding some rotation to the hips. Do you have any specific questions or anything on that, Kane? If not, I have one more thing I want to go over super quickly, but I think it would be easier to go over in the actual octopus rig itself. But I want to make sure you don't have any questions before I go to that. If not, I'll open. Yeah, for sure. Sure. But one thing I wanted to go over, which again, you don't have to do this for this shot. I think you could do it if you wanted to, and I think it would make life easier for you. And I think you could do it without essentially losing any animation. But let me just do this super quickly. Okay, you've got this guy, you've got this guy. And you've got this guy. Okay, so if this were me, King, and I was going into spline for this shot, which you can do this on your shot that's already animated and keep your animation the same. But if this were me, what I would do is I would create a NURBS curve, circle, modify. You know what? I'll name this NURBS circle octopus underscore COG. I'm just going to put it in a group node. I'm going to call it octopus underscore COG. And then I'm octopus cog group. There we go. And then I'm going to select the group, modify, match translation. And then I'm just going to scale it up, okay? I'm going to scale it up relatively big just so it's easy to see. But essentially the same thing I was talking about to you in your shot, I think I would do a little bit differently, and I'll show how. Ba, 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 ba. So I would do parent cog, child, neck number 2 control. Constrain parent. That way, if I move this, this moves along with it. And then if I move this, this moves individually, right? And then I would go parent, child, neck control number 1, constrain parent. So that way if I move this, the second neck control moves along. But then I'm going to take the blend parent and turn it to 0.5. So now, whenever I move it up, this control only moves 50% of it, which means also if I can click on this, it will only move 0.5. So that way, if I want to move the hips around, I get way more like fleshiness. And honestly, if I do, yeah. And so then what I would do is I would take this octopus cog group, shift select this main control, edit parent. So now if I select this, everything moves with it. So just like in your initial animation, original animation, this control, the one that you animated, would move everything. The only difference is if I wanted to move the head or the cog, it would be this thing. This would move the neck, the head, all of that. And this would be in world space, or I guess not world space. This would be in global control space. And then I would be able to animate this hip control individually of my cog. So then you're able to actually, like, if you're wanting to like snake him and you want to keep the head like straight and you want to be able to move like the hips or rotate the hips. So like this gives you way more freedom because now your, cog isn't just moving everything like that. And so if you wanted to get even fancier with it, you could possibly even, let me check this out. Child, constrain parent. You could even constrain those useless IK tentacles to this main control. Nah, that's not going to work. Never mind, I'm dumb. But hopefully you get the idea of like what I'm going for, of like this control is what I would animate for like the neck. And then I would go up to neck 03 control to animate this. And then even go up here to animate this. And then for the legs and hips and all that, I would just rotate this control. Because for an octopus, how did I get so smart? Animating a ton of shots and being lazy and not wanting to do the manual work to do it, and also having crappy rigs. And so being forced to just think, how do I make my life easier? That's the honest answer. I was working at a small VFX studio with very low budget dinosaur rigs, and I was doing like 800 to 900 frames a day of dinosaur shots. And so I was like, okay, how can I make this IK spine work better? And so I literally just started mixing and mashing different rig techniques together until I got rigs that kind of worked for me. So oh, that's a nice squash and stretch head. I like that a lot. That's kind of cool. But I also very much work within the IK. So like this is all very FK setup. And I like using IK, and I like things being like squashy and stretchy. So like for me personally, I would like to translate this control and be able to like move it around. But since I can't do that, I would probably set up a second constraint system. NURBS primitive, circle, match all transform. And I would probably make this my head control. And I would do parent, child, constrain, and then parent, child, constrain. This one's already parented. And so this one I would set a 0.5 blend parent on, so that way I could do this and actually have like squashing and stretching in the neck and the head. Because for me, rather than animating 3 controls to get the exact same effect, I'd rather just animate 1 control. And if I even wanted to, I could even do parent, child, constrain, parent, and have 2 constraints. One would be the head, the other would be the hips, and I could just turn the head to 0.2. And then I would be able to, like, you know, have just 1 head control. And that way, whenever I rotate it, I only have to animate 1 curve, and I get this really nice, like, fleshy animation in the rest of the neck. Yeah. Essentially, it's a do-it-yourself IK system. And so then, because if you move this now, this doesn't move along, well, then I'm going to want to put this child parent underneath this hierarchy. And since this hierarchy is now underneath this hierarchy, now I can move this. Now I can move this. And now I can move this. So now it's 2 controls instead of 4, and it's going to save me a crap ton of time. And now I'm able to also still animate this control. So there you go. So I don't know if that was helpful at all. Probably not, since you're this far into blocking, but I thought I would point it out because you could do this exact same thing on your shot as is. And just bake it to a cube, bake it to the NURBS curve, do the constraints on it. It would still work beautifully, perfectly. It's a lot of work if you don't want to deal with that. But for future reference, for everybody watching, I was like, you know what? Might as well show you guys just in case it's helpful. But do you have any other questions or anything on that, Kane? Or I think everything else is looking really solid. So I think just those couple things that I want you to look for this week as you move on to the next stage of blocking, I think you should be good. Yeah, I feel you, Kane. Because, like, that's kind of my big thing is it's like, if I do 80% simplifying before I start my shot, it's going to save me 80% of my time blocking. Like, if I get this rig here and I'm like, okay, this has 8 billion controls and this is going to make splining 50 hours harder, I would be better off spending a couple hours modifying this rig to work for me the way my brain works than it would to work with a rig that I don't like and then have to deal with not fully getting how to spline this whenever I get into the blocking phase. Or splining phase, sorry. So that's what I would do. I'm trying to think of a way. Yeah, that'd be too complicated. But yeah, this is honestly what I would do for this. And then boop. Boop. He's back to normal. But yeah. Really great work, Kane, this week. And let me know if you have any questions or anything like that. If not, I had Sanjana, I had Kane. Next we have... Hey, thanks for showing up, Ayub. Next we have... this one. And this one. Cool. Let me see. Okay, so we have animation addict, which will be a walk cycle. Yes, I can actually walk you through that super quick, Kane, of how you would switch that over. Because I'm dumb and I forgot that that would probably be something you'd want to do. So let me open that up. And then I'm going to do a walk cycle for animation addict, and then I'm going to go over splining for Pratham. So got a nice stream today. Lots of people showing up, lots of talking, lots of shots to look at. Life is good. So download octopus. Skip, 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 skip. Okay, so turn off lights, textures. Okay. So the way I would bake that over, if I were you, is I would just start, I would turn my scene to -50 just to be safe. Select everything, make sure I key everything on frame 1, frame -50. And then I'm just going to go in and I'm going to zero out all my controls to where he's back into T-pose. So now that he's into T-pose, I'm going to go over a couple base concepts that are important to remember. This is good to go. Okay. So a couple base concepts for me is, okay, controls. If I'm going to be creating my own controls, how am I going to move it where I want without putting values on it, right? So if I create a NURBS curve, right, and I scale it up, I move it here. Okay, this is where I want it. Now it's got attributes in here. I could go to modify freeze transformations, but then that's going to break the rotation orientation and sometimes break the translation orientation. So what I do whenever I create controllers for rigs, I go create NURBS circle. So I'm going to call this octopus _COG. And then I'm going to control G group. And I'm going to call it octopus _COG _GRP. So now I'm actually moving a group, and I can scale it up. I can translate it. And I'm just going to go to this control, modify match transforms. Oops. Modify match translation. That's what I wanted. Okay, so there we go. So now my actual control is zeroed out at the 0 point, but there's translations and scale on the group, which doesn't matter because I'm not moving the group around. And so now what I need to do is go ahead and just duplicate this group, Control D, and I'm going to call this octopus head _GRP. And I'm going to call this octopus head CTRL for control. And I'm going to go ahead and call this control as well. There we go. So now we have both controls, and for my own taste, I like scaling down this control, so I'm going to scale down the group just a little bit. And then I'm going to, yes, you can. So that's the thing, is I can freeze transforms on the group, but that's not going to mess up the rotation or orientation of the actual control itself. So yeah, that's a good point, Alan. I can just freeze transformations if I wanted to on the group. So then, modify freeze transformations. My rotations and translations of this control are still intact. So boom, there we go. We are good to go with the controls. So now I have them where I want, and I could start putting constraints on them, but as soon as I start constraining these controls, right, these controls have animation on them, right? These have values on them right here. So if I constrain them, Your animation is going to be gone. You're not going to have your animation anymore. Yeah, it is cleaner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at what controls I need, what controls I want the animation from, and I'm going to bake those out to cubes. Then I'm going to do my constraints, and then I'm going to bake the new controls to the cubes. So for example, these controls here, these two, these are just going to be in-betweens of these two controls, because what I was talking about of baking controls down to fewer controls to get simpler animation. So this one's going to control this control. This one's going to control this one. And then this is going to control the head in this one. So to put it simply, I need to bake a cube to... This control has nothing on it, which is good. So I just need to keep this control and this control's animation. So let's go ahead and just create polygon cube, modify, match all transforms, scale the cube up. There we go. Set a key on it. And then I'm just going to use Xform copy, bake all keys. I could also just do a constraint. Yes, I can show in the outliner. Windows, outliner. I can just dock this right here. And there we go. Cool beans. So, where is my cube? Where'd it go? There it is. So I could also do this with a my constraint where instead of using Xform, which is way quicker and easier, I could do parent, child, constrain. Oh, really? I have to ban someone else. Sad. It gives me a weird sense of power banning people. Anyway, so I could do parent, child, constrain, turn blend parent on, key every 4 frames, and then delete the constraint. Xform is easier for demo purposes, so I'm just going to do that. So now I have this cube perfectly following the control I need. And I can turn it to stepped mode, just for demo purposes. Turn it to stepped. And we are good to go. It's following perfectly. Cool beans. And if I was to be tidy, if I was a decent human being, I would call this hip underscore anim underscore bake. And then I'm going to Control D duplicate. Now I'm going to go to the head. Modify match translation. Modify match rotation. And then I'm just going to scale it down, set a key, and I'm just going to call this head underscore anim underscore bake. And I'm going to shift click the head, copy, bake all keys. Okay. So now that I have both of these following, which again, I need to set both these guys to stepped. There we go. The neck and the head animation is baked to cubes and is working perfectly. So now we just need to remember a couple things. Kane animated these controls because these controls move everything, right? So again, what I was talking about before, if these controls are controlling everything, I'm going to need these controls to control both of these controls, or else I'm going to lose animation through hierarchy. So first things first is I'm going to do the constraints. I'm going to go ahead and hide these cubes for now, do the constraints, parent, and then bake out. So parent, child, constrain, parent. So now this bad boy controls him. Parent, constrain, parent, So now this controls both of these controls. Now I'm going to go to the channel box, turn blend parent to 0.5 on this one so that I get this nice fall off. And that way, whenever I animate these controls, I get a nice fall off. That was weird. And so now parent, child, constrain, parent. Now this is controlling the head. Parent, child, constrain, parent. So now this is controlling the neck as well. And so this is now where you get into a double constraint. So if you constrain one object to do different objects, it's going to split it 50-50. So if I'm doing this, I don't want this controller following exactly with the head. I want it to be split. So right now I have head control, parent, this control child, right? Octopus head control is constraining this control. So if I now take the hip or cog control, parent, child, constrain, parent, now there are two constraints battling over control of this control here, which means when I move this, it's only moving 50%. Half of it's being controlled by this guy. The other half is being controlled by the head, which is exactly what I want. So now that that's done and over with, if I move this guy, it's not going to move. So now I'm going to take the octopus cog group, select this control, and in the outliner, you can see I'm just going to edit parent. So now this guy moves this guy, and then I'm going to select this octopus head group, select this control, edit parent. So now if I move this control, it works. If I move this control, it works. Boom, everything's working exactly as I want it to. But now if I play the animation, we have a problem because there's no head animation anymore or neck animation. Well, that's where the bake animation cubes come to. So we have hip anim bake, turn on, head anim bake, turn on. We still have that animation, they're just on cubes. And since our zero pose is the exact same, I can take this control, which is the hips, shift select the cube, copy, bake all keys. And now I can take head control, cube, copy, bake all keys. And so now that the animation is baked, theoretically, I've got the same animation, it's just in splined. So I need to turn that to stepped. Flip it to stepped. The other thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this control, I'm going to go rotation order, flip the rotation orders to best, just for a good practice. And then pray that it works because it's on stream and I'm going to look like an idiot if it doesn't work. Shot cam, none. Okay, let's see if this works. Yeah, I can show you the constraints listed. So if you're looking at, let me go ahead and delete the cubes. This guy. And if you're wondering why I'm manually opening these, it's because I accidentally broke my expand all hotkey, I think. Oh, no, I didn't. Never mind. Never mind. Okay, so if you can see, this neck control has a neck 01, neck 02 parent constraint, which means that this is 1 and this is 1. This one here literally just has one neck constraint here. So it all works very nicely, having essentially 3 controls that you have to animate instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 controls. So there you go. And so now that everything is baked out properly, then you just have to go through and animate your shot, which for me would be 10 times easier because now I can just grab this head control and I can move this guy however I want. I can take the hip control. I can move this however I want. And then I can shake this control and move this however I want. So hopefully that's helpful, Kane. One other thing that I would also do, just for quality of life, is I would then go through and select the hip control, parent, child, all of these stupid broken IK, these IK things. Because they rotate with the FK and you're using only FK, what happens is you move the FK and for some reason the IK moves with only in rotate X, which totally breaks the use of your FK. So I would go through and do parent, child, and literally just constrain the IK controls to the hips. Parent, child, constrain, parent, parent, child, constrain, parent. Parent. Boom. So there you go. Now all my IK weird tentacle root IK controls are constrained to this. So now whenever I move it, they follow with. That way, whenever I move these controls, they only move around what I want, right? Which is ideal. And strangely enough, these controls do not follow. That is a weird thing of the rig. But anyway, that way, whenever you move this around, then you can move these tentacles down, and you shouldn't have any problem at all posing the legs out like you were having earlier. So yeah, no problem, Kane. Hopefully it helps. Like, that's kind of my thing, is like setting things up, re-rigging bad rigs. So yeah, if you ever need help re-rigging a rig, hit me up. So with that, I think I'll now, unless you have any more questions, Kane, also feel free to refer back to the video. I will save it and upload it. That way, you know, if you need to refer back on the steps, you can take a look. So I'll probably also highlight it and put it as a demo just so people can get to it quick if they need it. So now I'm going to go to Nikita, because awesome. Let me know how it works, and if it doesn't work, you know, we can work something out, and you can maybe even send me the file and I can do the constraint stuff for it, bake it out, and then send it back to you. Because it's like, to be quite honest, this is just a technical thing. This isn't really an artistic thing. So you can send it over to me. I can help you get it fixed up if it doesn't work, and then I can send it back to you, the latest version. So with that, I have 2 downloads that I need to go over. Where are they? Okay, so I have a walk cycle that I'm going to go over fairly quickly, I believe, and then I'm going to go over a spline pass for a pantomime shot. So documents, downloads, open this up. Okay. Very nice. Let me put these. left view, and front view. Very nice. This is definitely an improvement, Nikita, especially from the volley walk cycle. I think the only thing that you're getting wrong posing wise within like your key poses is the front view of the legs. So essentially what needs to happen, if I can figure out how to use this rig. So your contact pose is relatively working. Down pose is working. But here, this leg needs to come in. And essentially what's going to happen is if like my hands, I'm pretending these are feet, it's going to come up, it's going to peel off the ground, and then it's going to rotate around like that. So you're going to be walking relatively like that. So it's going to be like walk, 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 walk. So like your feet kind of rotate in through this section. So like something like this, it's going to rotate in a little bit. You're going to get to your up pose, which I believe would be here. Let me just make sure I'm not messing up any keys here. And then you're going to go back to the out pose. So something relatively like this, right? And I'm going to do the same thing with this foot. Your up pose is going to be relatively here, here, well, that's a lot of in and out movement there. This is going to start to come over. This is going to come in. It's going to start to come back out. Okay. So now that I've got that working posing wise, what I'm going to do, because it's kind of hard for me to start splining from your splining, I'm going to go ahead and key this back out to the key poses, flip it to stepped, and kind of go over your blocking super quickly so I make sure that your blocking is working, and then I'll go into spline. Because if yep, peels off the big toe. Because if the blocking isn't working 100%, the splining's not going to work 100%. So I'm going to flip this back to stepped mode, and I'm just going to go through and refine the poses. So this is a forward walking walk cycle, which is perfect. This is what I suggested you do. My first big note, make your walk cycle perfectly linear. So whenever I have the translate Z, which is the forward movement, I'm going to take the first key, which would be the contact, and the last key, which would also be the contact. I'm going to set it to be linear. And now I'm going to go to my key poses, and I'm going to set keys on this curve. And now I'm going to set this back to stepped mode. And as you can see, because your forward motion wasn't perfectly linear, your steps are a little bit out of whack. So my reason for saying move your cog perfectly linear is whenever you walk, your forward momentum is relatively linear. It's not perfectly linear, but it's relatively. But when we're moving into animation, one of our jobs is to make things as simple as we possibly can. So we have as little as work as we possibly can to make things as nice as possible. And so the pros to a not perfectly linear walk cycle is there's not any. Because if you notice the speed up and slow downs, it's going to become distracting. If you have a perfectly linear cog, it's not going to stand out of, oh, that looks bad because it's linear. It's going to look relatively normal because that's relatively what we do. But if you have one that's just minor slowdowns and speed ups in the cog, that's going to create knee pops. That's going to create leg spacing issues, as we see here. And it's going to make the walk cycle harder to cycle, right? So for me, the pros versus cons, it way outweighs having a linear cog than not, because it's just 10 times simpler to have a linear forward moving cog and not have to deal with all the leg pops and all that kind of thing from there. So now that I have the center of gravity, the hip controller, exactly where I need it to be, now I can focus on making sure my poses are perfect. So we have contact down, passing up, contact down, passing up, contact perfect, perfect up and down. Now we have cool. Now we have this leaning a little bit towards the left. I'm going to make this goes right, this goes left. Okay, that's perfect. Cool. So now that I have that working correctly, now I'm going to go through and re-step your steps. So this is good. This is good. This is too far back. Can I show what again? Animation edit? Yes, let me show you how I set the keys. One more thing I'm going to go over very quickly before I do it again is another thing you need to check is that your contact pose is relatively what it should be. So hold on, walk. So if I go back to that video of walk cycle reference that I showed, I think last week, let me go to YouTube. Okay, so if I go back to this video, right? If I'm looking at the contact pose, which would be basically here, he's almost perfectly split between his 2 feet. He's riding exactly almost, because like you've got this dot here for the back foot, this here for the front foot. So you've got basically 1 square, 2 square, 3 square, 4 squares, basically 5 squares in between his 2 feet. And his hips line up perfectly on the third line. So 1, 2, 1, 2. So if I'm looking at this, I've got this heel on this line, this one on this line. So the hips need to line up perfectly in between. And so if that's there, then this needs to line up relatively in this middle box here, which means that my center of gravity probably needs to come down slightly, and my foot roll what in the blazes? How do they do the foot roll? Check RY at contact. Yes, that is also a good point. This thing does not have foot roll. That is very... Oh, here we go. Okay, cool. So we've got toe IK. I don't like that very well, but okay. There we go. So then another thing is that your rotate Y, your cog should be, or hips, I guess. You know, I'll use the hip controller. I'd put the hips a little farther this way. So let's do -18. Okay, so the way I did the hips, Nikita, oh, yes. Sorry, Animation Addict. Sometimes I go a little bit fast, so I'll try to go a little bit slower. So basically, if your cog is traveling perfectly linear forwards, if I go and set the translate Z of my first pose, which again should be in between both feet, so relatively here, and I'm going to go ahead and rotate this foot. What is going on here? Heel ball. Okay. Relatively like this pose here. So if this first pose is good and the last pose, I need to put, again, back a little bit. The translate Y needs to be the same. So if it's -0.218, it needs to be -0.218. And then I'm going to move the cog forwards to be right in between the two footsteps like I had before. And then again, I'm going to take the heel ball, -1.8, -1.8, and then I'm going to zero out the rotates, zero out the translates, and use this rotator to make it come up a bit. And then again, I'm going to take this and do -18 for the rotate Y. So now these should be the same. So now I'm going to go back to my other contact, which should be here. And I'm going to make the rotate Y +18. Cool. Now I'll pay more attention to those later, but right now what I'm focusing on is the contacts. So if I fixed this foot here, it contacts here, which is good. And now it needs to contact here. So now we have nice, good foot placement. Boom. This all works perfectly. But now I'm noticing on my passing pose, this foot is way too far back. So now I need to shift this foot a little bit forward, which means the contact, I need to make sure these are the same. So I'm going to middle mouse drag and click. There we go. And then again here, I'm going to translate this forward to get this at the right spot. So I'm just going to -3 heel ball. So I'm going to grab this, click this, and do -3 heel ball. Cool. So again, I'm going to have to bring the cog down because that's the contact. This is the same contact as these, and these are at negative 0.218, so negative 0.218. There we go. Should be good to go. Pull this back a little bit. Boom, boom. This needs to come back a little bit, so I'm just going to make sure that the translate Z is the same, so it's at negative 5.696. So I need to do negative 5.696. There we go. And then negative 5.696. There we go. And this is not all in stepped, so I'm going to try to make this all in stepped. But first, whoever followed, thank you for the follow. I didn't catch it. But so what I did, Animation Addict, so what I did was I set the first pose, right, how I wanted it. I set the last pose how I wanted it. So now I'm just going to go to my keys, which is at frame 4, and hit S. Frame 7, hit S. Hit frame 10, frame 13, frame 16, frame 19, frame 22, and just hit S on all of them. And the reason for doing that is so that I can then flip it to stepped keys and still have the cog moving forward on every key pose. So there we go. Now this walk cycle is working much nicer because the cog motion is moving perfectly linear and I'm working the steps in off of that. So now I need to figure out why I'm having this issue, which is there rotate, rotate, rotate. This is at 0. This is at 0, okay. This is at negative 18. This is at negative 18. So why am I getting... Let's just pull this up just a little bit. This is a little bit too... It's fine. It's fine. I think. Move this a little bit farther. Move this a little bit farther back. That way I can move this heel a little bit farther down. And then I just need to delete these again, set this back to linear, and then key out my key poses. And then flip it back to stepped mode. There we go. So now this contact pose I need to fix because again, if you look at this one and you look at this one, the heels are much lower to the ground. There's much less foot roll. And I have more rotate Y, so I'm going to go to this one. And again, I'm going to do positive 18. I'm going to zero out the TY. I'm going to zero out the rotate. And I'm going to pull this up to like this, essentially. That way it matches closer to these poses that I've set. Make that 0, and we should be good to go. So now I need to work on the issue of this is my contact, but it's below my down pose, right? Because I had to lower it to make sure that the wider steps worked better. So now I'm just going to grab my down pose, my passing pose, my up pose, and then my down pose, my up pose, and my passing pose, and I'm going to pull them all down so that my down pose is now below my passing pose, or contact pose, sorry. There we go. So I just lowered the cog overall because my steps are wider now. So there we go. And so now I'm going to take the rotate Y. It looks relatively good. We'll keep it with that for now. Let's look at it from the front view. Front view, let's turn off Minerv's curves. Okay, so the farthest right, you are correct, the farthest right should be the passing pose, and the farthest left should be the passing pose. This is correct. I would try to ease after that, so on my up pose, I still should be right. Like, you're on your passing pose, right here, right? You're on your passing pose, which means you're leaning on your right foot. Until your foot plants, you shouldn't start moving left very much. So I'm going to keep this curve very close. And then on my contact, that's whenever it comes over and swings through. So this one, I'm going to keep this fairly close. That way when I swing through. So now I have something more like this, which I think works much, much, much better. Now I'm going to go to the hips. And again, I think we talked about this before. I think this should be flipped. Times equals -1. So basically, as you're on this right foot, the hips should be tilting this way because this foot is pulling it down and this foot is pushing the hips upwards, right? And then as you switch through to the contact, it should go the opposite way. So I'm watching this and I'm like, I'm pretty happy with this. The only thing is I think there's too much side to side. So I'm going to take this curve and I'm going to do times equals 0.6, which is going to scale the curve down 60%. And I'm like, okay, this is pretty solid now. But now the foot plants are too wide. So I'm going to take, right now, TX is at 0.1. TX is at -0.1. I'm going to try and see what happens if I turn it to 0 on the translate X, which means this should be 0. And then when this one comes in, it comes back out, and then these should go to 0. So what do we have here? I think that works better. And so I'm just going to take this one, turn this to 0, to 0, oops, to 0, turn these to 0, and then as this one comes out, it starts to come inwards, and then it goes back out to 0. So this is essentially what your feet should look like. Also, if I'm looking at your poses from the front view, I can see that the arm is not cycling properly. It's popping back. I kind of like this one, so I'm just going to middle mouse drag this frame over here. That way you get a nicer cycle. Actually, you know what? I'm going to take frame 1, middle mouse drag it to 25, and hit S to set a key. That way, nope, I messed it up. There we go. So if I look at this from the left view, okay, the only thing that's not working is this foot here. It's higher, it's lower, higher, lower. So I'm just gonna make it higher on this frame. So I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna look at what is this value. Okay, this is at 10. So I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna make this 10. Is there stretching on the leg? I need to pull this forward a little bit, which is then going to make all of these come forward. So this is now -6. So I'm going to make all of these -6. I'm going to make this -6. So now these are relatively the same pose, which is nice. I can slide this forward a little bit. Cool. This needs to be this way. There we go. So does all that make sense so far, Animation Addict? And then as for the rotate Y goes, essentially what happens with the rotate Y of your hips is as you walk forward, your hips are rotating forward and dragging your leg around. So what I'm going to try to do is the farthest left should be on your contact and the farthest right should be on your contact. Cool, cool. So if this is -18, right? If you're thinking about it as your hips pull this way and that's what drags your foot over, your hips shouldn't rotate until a little bit before your leg starts coming over to step, right? So if I'm thinking about here, I'm like, okay, well, the foot is still way back here. So the rotate Y should be favoring my contact to down, right? And then on the passing pose, well, the leg is passing. So it should just be leading just a little bit, right? And then your up pose, your hips should be forward because it's swinging the leg to get your contact. And then you have your contact again. So it's 18, so this one should be a little bit behind that. So you should have a curve that looks relatively like this. And so now if your contact is +18, contact is -18, that means, let's say your passing pose or up pose, let's say it's 16. So let's take this up pose and let's make it -16. And then let's take your down pose, let's make it -16, which means that this down pose would be +16. And so now if you take the passing pose, that's 9.5. So this passing pose should be negative 9.5. So now this is working pretty well. Now the only thing I forgot to shift was the feet on the passing pose, because the passing pose is broken now. So I need that to be here. Up pose needs to be a little bit farther forward to contact. There we go. Down pose should be there. Cool. So down pose should be farther forward. Passing pose good. Up pose needs to be out here. Let's pull this down. What do you want to do if you want to add extra steps? I'll go over that in a second here. I need to finish refining these down pulls real quick. There we go. So the simplest way to add more forward steps would be to use infinity curves, essentially. So what I can do, if you're familiar with infinity curves, I'll skip it, but I can show you super quickly. So let's say I want him to walk, instead of 25 frames, right? I want him to walk for 200 frames. So I get here, and nothing happens. So what can I do about this? I can use infinity curves, which basically in short form, I can show you what that means. So let's say I have the side to side movement of the hips, right? If I go to view infinity, okay, this is an invisible curve that currently doesn't do anything, right? If I set a key, I can move it up, but it just stays straight off into infinity. Like this goes on for the rest of your timeline. So if I want, I can go to curves, post infinity, and hit cycle. And so basically what that does is it creates a ghost of this animation curve and it copies it all the way off into infinity. And so if I move this key, you see every key in that same space follows with it. It's like a reference of your keys. And so that works great if I'm wanting to copy side to side motion, because like you see, it still just keeps going side to side, side to side, side to side. But the problem is, let's say I want to do that with all of my curves, right? So let's select everything, curves, post infinity, cycle. Well, the problem is, well, now he keeps shooting back to the original because my translate Z, it goes to 25 and then it shoots back to frame 1, right? So how can I keep his translate forward keep going forward? Well, there's a thing called curves, post infinity, cycle with offset. And basically what that does is once you get to the end frame, it takes the first frame and adds a bunch of numbers to it to make the curve stay linear. So for translate Z, I'm going to do cycle with offset, and looky there. We have a perfect linear curve that's going off into outer space, right? So basically what I need to do is I need to select everything. I need to go select curves, post infinity, cycle, right? Which will cycle my walk cycle and it keep shooting it back into space. But then I'm going to take the feet and I'm going to take the cog and I'm going to select the translate Z of all 3 of these guys. And I'm going to go select curves, post infinity, cycle with offset. And I should have a perfectly cycling walk cycle, except for the pull vectors, which I forgot to also curves, cycle with offset. And there we go. We should have a perfectly cycling walk cycle that will go for 200,000 frames if I want it to. So I can set this to 500 and he's just going to keep on walking. So there you go. Does that make sense, Animation Addict? So cool. So if I were you, I would go in and address these blocking notes because the blocking is the most important. This is a huge step up from your walk cycle last week, I think it was. So I would try to really refine your poses. Make sure your poses are working really nicely. I would say these poses that I have aren't perfect. Like for the down pose, I'd like this to be a little bit lower with the toe up. But strangely, this does not have foot roll. So I would have to do this thing, which is weird. I don't know why this rig does not have foot roll. It kind of makes me upset. But I would have to like pull the toe up and then pull this down, right? I will also pull this forward just a little bit because it's making me upset that it's that far. This can go up a little bit. And this can go down a little bit. This can go up. Toe up. There we go. There you go. So does that help, Animation Addict? I would suggest do these blocking notes, and then next week we can go into more splining stuff. So hopefully that helps. And then lastly, we've got Pratham's shot for pantomime. It's a RAR file, so I need to extract that. Let me extract this real quick. That's perfect, Alan. Yes, thank you so much. Always here with the good links. So, anything about walk cycles, foot peeling off, like, yeah, try to read, watch as much as you can. So, what am I looking for? I'm looking for a folder. Ha, found it. Okay. Dining chair, skip that. I browse. Tablet. Skip. And let's hope it loads up good. And during the loading, I'm going to take a drink. Alrighty, here. Let's take a look at these. Windows, General, File Path. Rigs. Crew. My textures. Cool. She's got textures. Cool. So let me take a look at this and I will give some feedback. All right, cool. Let me super quickly, let me just go to the campus real quick and I'm going to look you up. That way I can watch it with the props just so I have the full picture before I go into like splining stuff. Okay. What week of this are you in, Pratham? What week of the shot are you in, Pratham? If you're still here. 4th week? Ah, so this is final week. Cool, 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 cool. Okay. So I'm going to just quickly create a proxy chair so she ain't sitting in the air. Yep. Good old AM hustle. Splining and polishing in week 4. Cool. That's all I need. She's got a phone, so I'm going to quickly... Just going to go parent. Just going to group this. And I'm just going to go parent, child, constraint. Okay, so I just put the... Okay, very interesting. Very interesting. We love when this happens. Constrain, add. Please work, sir. Okay, cool, cool, cool. So I just constrained a group and, you know, all that fun stuff. So I'm going to turn these off. Okie dokie. So how would I go about? Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to, right here, okay? Right here is whenever I'm going to switch to FK. Everything before this moment, I'm going to have an IK. And I'll explain that here in a second, but I'm going to do this over a one frame switch. So 57 is FK, set a key. 56 is IK, set a key. Snap to IK. And it looks like you already have what I was going to do. So that saves me a little bit of time. Kind of. Let's go ahead and just turn this off for now, though. Okay. Cool. And I'm just going to go ahead and go to snap elbow. Delete those. Cool. So now I'm just going to go back and I'm just going to start snapping to IK all of these keys. Okay, so now that I've done that, I'm going to go here. I'm going to honestly just delete these keys on the elbow. Just going to have this key. I'm going to snap elbow. I'm going to set this, and I'm just going to hand place it to where it's exactly where I want it. And to be honest, the easiest way to do this is create cube, match, translation. So I just matched it to the bin bow. And then I'm going to go back here and I'm going to select this guy. And then I'm going to shift select the cube, modify, match, translation. Boom, there we go. Instead of having to hand do it, why not just let a cube do it for you? Yeah, so what I do, Pratham, is in blocking, I'm going to do FK because FK is going to keep stretching, right? Because the thing is that here, if I move the IK around, guess what happens? I get all this stretching and squashing. But if I block in FK, there's going to be no stretching because I'm rotating from this point. So then once I have my blocking done, then when I go to spline and polish, I'll flip it, I'll bake it out to IK. That way the blocking doesn't have any stretching. But then the little tiny like micro movements of the leg don't slide around on the FK elbow, if that makes sense. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this control, which is this bend bow, and I'm going to do parent, child, constrain, parent, boom. So now, sir, there we go. If I move this in IK, what the frick happened here? Parent, child. Oh, I need to do a constraint with only translations because there's no rotation attributes. So if I uncheck this, now the constraint should work. And so now if I move the knee, now the elbow follows with perfectly. And so then if I really wanted, so you said that you really like being able to rotate instead of translate and stretch, and I do too. So theoretically, what I could do is create like a faux setup, but that's more trouble than it's worth because it's only 56 frames. So I'm just going to leave it as is. And now I have a really nice setup where I could, if I need to, move this around and it follows with. Now here comes some things that I think are important that I'm going to do on a layer. You can do otherwise, but I think this is really going to help sell your shot. So first things first, I'm going to select all of these and I'm going to add them to a layer. Just for demo purposes, I would suggest you actually make these changes instead of doing it on a layer. I'm doing it on a layer just for speed purposes. But right now, she's holding her phone like this, right? It's like this. So like if she's looking at it, this isn't exactly how naturally we would hold a phone. Her wrist is also like this. So it's like very uncomfortable looking hand pose. What I would try is something more like this, right? So if she's using it, it gives her room to use the thumb, all of that. So I'm just going to quickly rotate her hand roughly where I think, like if I'm like holding a phone, right? My hand's going to be like that. So I'm going to roughly rotate this, and then I'm going to rotate the phone. I'm going to translate it to where something like that. And then I'm going to take this control that way she has at the ready, she would be able to type with her thumb if she needed to. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take master spread, nope, master cup. I'm going to spread that around. I'm going to take this guy. I think I'm going to rotate the a little bit more, take this a little bit less, translate this a little bit more over. Aya's got those stinking spider fingers, so bear with me. She's by far not the easiest character to pose fingers. Yeah. One thing to remember is you don't just move your fingers like this. Like, you move your fingers all around. You can tuck them in, you can spread them out. So I would try to rotate these spider fingers around because they're so long. The only way to shorten them is to rotate them around like this. And I'm actually going to undo, because now that I changed what I'm planning to do, I'm going to undo these rotations here. I'm going to take this guy, I'm going to remove the master cup. Still have a little bit. Hey, no problem, Akita. Keep working hard. You're posting every week and you're getting better every week with walk cycles. It's really nice to see somebody putting in that much effort and really trying to succeed and get better. So yeah, keep up the great work and keep showing up to the streams and showing your work. I like enjoy opening it up and giving you feedback. So. Okay, so this is roughly what I'm wanting, but now that I'm watching, I'm like, the fingers are too straight. So I'm gonna try to overall rotate them this way a bit. And I feel like the hand is still a little bent. I'm gonna rotate this way and rotate the phone. That. Now what am I? I'm going to try to rotate this here, rotate this here, rotate this here, and, you know, that's good enough. I am good with this. For now, I just need to get a little roundness. And I'll call that good. So if you can see here, scale the fingers. Yeah, maybe a little bit. There you go. So if you can see here, Pratham, just like the difference between this and this, like that's a massive difference in how the fingers are posed out. And it just gives you a little more specific. And like if I was giving more time to this, I would probably try to spread the hand itself because the hand is very squashed in. But even there, like you can see, have I tried to scale? Yes, do whatever you need to make a good pose, Pratham. That's a pretty much rule of thumb with anything, is if you can do it to make a better pose, do it, as long as it's not 10 times more work to spline. So yeah, so that's what I would do here. I'm only getting about 10 frames per second. So I'm going to try to switch her to proxy mode. What about low res? What do I get with low res? Okay, so the next thing I'm noticing is she's like looking at her phone, and it looks like she goes like this. Like, like the neck moves up, but the head stays the same and the eyes look up. So it's like, and it feels very disconnected. So what I think needs to happen is the rotations of the neck need to be toned down, which would be this here. And the rotation of the head needs to be amped up. So right here, you're fine, I think. So let's just take this and let's just tone it down. So now that we've done that, so basically your eyes are going to move. If your eyes see something and you react to it, you're going to do it within 4 frames after. Would be the slowest. So she looks that the diamond's gone. 1, 2, 3, 4. About here is whenever she should start reacting. The neck reacts before the head, and that's what I'm reacting to that I don't like. So I'm going to take all of this and I'm going to delay it by 2 frames. That way, eyes hit 1, 2, 3, 4. I can set a key here, and the head can start reacting to what she sees. And I'm just going to delete this here, and I'm going to try to tween this pose to be a little closer. So something like that. let's see, I'm going to try to do that. And now I'm going to try to take what the neck is doing and move it back a frame. Because right now, the neck moves up so slowly. Now that I have like the head moving first, then the neck is moving like 3-4 frames after the head stops moving. And that's a little too much for me. So I'm just going to take these in frames of the neck and move them back a bit. And now what I'm also going to try to do is, I think overall we can tone all of this down for the rotate Y of the neck. There we go. That feels way nicer to me. And I feel like we can add a little bit of motion in the spine. And I'm just going to do this on the IK because I don't want to mess up your blocking because you have a ton of keys there. And rather than deleting it all, I'm just going to do it on this IK. But for you, because you're using FK, I would suggest doing it on the FK. I'm just kind of showing what I want, and then you can go and you can do it on the FK spine. So if she's in this pose here, this should be... Also, I prefer using IK anyway. That's why I'm also using it, because IK is easier for me. So she's in this pose here, and then she goes, what? So I'm just going to take all this and delete it. That way she stays in this pose. And then I can just zero it out by here. Cool. So she's going to go, what? Ah, right. Now everything's starting to look connected, right? Because you have the head, neck, and then body. And then through here, I would try to, basically she looks up and then she's like, what? Right? So I would try to lead with like the back, and the neck and the head can kind of like come forward a bit, and she can like, what? Right? And so you're going to get a little bit of a anticipation forward through here. Until you get to this frame, right? And so you're going to anticipate forward here. She's going to come down a little bit. It's probably going to delay a frame. And then here, I'm going to overshoot it back a little bit. And I'm going to have it come up a little bit, so it's gonna go wheat, right? So she like anticipates forward. I can even push this farther to where she's like here. So it's like she anticipates, jumps up, and then settles forward, right? Wow. And so you can see the difference between... Oh, this is not done on a layer. Never mind. Anyway. I'm going to continue. So So again, if she's leading with the back, then the neck's gonna react after that. So here I would try to have like the neck coming forward a little bit. And since the spine starts moving forward, if the back starts moving forward here, I'm going to wait 2 frames. So here's whenever it should start moving forward. So I'm going to just tween that, and so it goes, wah. So this is a good frame here, so I'm going to delete these so it comes forward, and then it comes back, and then it settles here. Yeah, exactly. Wow, right? If I take this section, I play it through just so I can get 24 frames a second and just watch what it looks like. Right. So that's what I'm trying to go for. And then for the cog, she jumps up, and right now she hits and then comes down slightly and then comes up. I would try to, if she hits her pose here, I would try to have it come up just a few frames more and then come back down. Right? That just softens do you see how like that just makes a slight difference? And I'm also going to try to take the translate Y that I have here and offset it so that you get a little decompression in the spine too. Right? And then as she makes this foot roll, right? As she starts to lean over onto this leg, this right leg, the hips should be leaning towards the left here, right? So she's at this pose. Tween it over here. Hello, Delac. Thank you for the follow. And she should stay leaning on the left leg until she swings over this way, right? So she's leaning on her right leg. And then as she starts going over to slide her right foot, because she has to get on the left foot to slide the right foot. So then the hips are going to slide over this way. Which means I can ease here. Autodesk Maya, Delac. Right. Like that might be a little too much of a hip move, but you can see like how much that adds, like adding the hip motion of switching your weight. And then right now, if I'm watching, her head, her neck, her body, they're all moving as a unit, right? So I'm just going to take I'm going to lead with the eyes, right? And so as a rule of thumb, eyes, no matter how far they move, even right to left, it's not going to take more than 3 to 4 frames to move somewhere. So if the eyes are here and they start looking here, 1, 2, 3, 4, they're going to be there, right? And it's going to be 1 frame, 90%, 2 frames, 90%, and then soft. I'm gonna delay this a frame. There we go. So it's gonna be like that, right? 1, 2, boom, boom, right? And so if the eyes are looking here, I can take this head move, and I can move it back 1 frame. So now the head starts to move first, then the body second. And then I can take the neck, leave it where it's at, but then I can take the rotations of the spine and I can just move them back 1 frame. I can delay them so it goes right, which again, I'm moving a stepped key, so that's not perfect. So let's just try this, right? And maybe that's a little too much, so I'm gonna go ahead and move that back and just leave it. Like, that's fine. So I'm gonna go ahead and, you know, one quick thing I'm gonna do before I move on to splining is I'm just going to push this shoulder a lot. Shoulders are the #1 thing I see students not push. As a student, I see a lot of people like being shy about moving the shoulders, but you can really push those shoulders and it really makes a difference in your posing. So for example, you have this or this, right? This one feels more engaged for me. And then slight posing adjustments. There you go. Nothing massive, right? Just slight things, but I think like this here makes a way more appealing pose than this just in the shoulders alone. And then just pushing things here and there, just add a little bit of spice to it. And then I can push the head angle as well to get that. She's looking at her phone relatively close to her face, so her eyes are going to be slightly converged. But personally, I would pull it out to something like this. And then, as the eyes go, I know you haven't gotten into the face a ton, but I'm going to give you a couple facial notes too, because again, this is week 4. You're going to want to start thinking about the face for your dialogue assignment. So give me 1 second and I will have a couple quick posing notes. Because again, your splining that you had is really, really, really solid. I'm just showing you ways that you can plus your stuff. So let's go to Aya. Select. Add this to a layer. Set a key on it. Try to have the peak of the eyelids over her pupil. So if you look at the top of the pupil, the top of the eyelid should always be over the top of the pupil. And so then you're going to... Oh, dang. This has been a long stream. Let's go. I enjoy it, though. Like, most streams I end early just because there's not, like, a ton to go over. But, like, if there's people showing, I'm always going to, you know, until it becomes too late. But I don't have to work until 11 a.m., so I can stay up late most days and just, like, hang out and chill. So... move this over here. Rotate. Yep. So essentially, rule of thumb is your upper and lower lid shapes should match 50% the eyelid shape, 50% the eyebrow shape as a rule of thumb. Now, if you have it close to the eyebrows, it's going to follow the shape of the eyebrows more. If it's closer to the eyelids, it's going to follow the shape of the eyelids more, right? So this is close to the eyelids. So I'm going to pull this up slightly, which I don't get great shapes from, unfortunately. But I'm going to try to pull this up slightly just to get a little more of like this up of the eyebrow, but try to keep it mostly what the eyelids are because it's closer to the eyelids. So like you can see like instantly the difference between that and that. And that comes just by shaping the upper lids. I can go in and I can start shaping the lower lids. I can get these shaped here. Again, following the lower peak. Just gonna move that there for now. Following the peak of the lower lid for the peak of or bottom peak of the pupil. And then moving this accordingly. Personally, I would probably not have the lid so wide. And so here's something that, again, this is a method that I use, which honestly I think everyone should use. It's fast, and it's not cheating because you're building everything yourself. Yes. So what I do for all of my facial poses is I use a pose library, but do not confuse that with the pose library that AM gives you. So if you look at Aya's pose library, do I even have it? Aya's pose library. You have all these poses that AM gives you. You have these poses. You have these poses. These are all, if you're in class 4, cheating. do not use any of these poses the AM gives you because you're not learning posing yourself. What I do suggest is use Pose Library as a tool because it's free. I've been to almost 10, 15 different studios professionally, from the highest level to the lowest level. Every studio has a Pose Library. So it is a very good tool to use. And even if you don't have a Pose Library, you can do the exact same thing with Maya itself. But what I'm suggesting to do, every rig you're going to use, so if you're going to use Apollo in your shot, open up Apollo before you start your shot and make these poses. If you're going to use Aya, if you're going to use Jules, if you're going to use Overlord, open him up before you animate anything and just squash his face as much as you can. So you can see here I have Aya squash, I have a squash left, a squash right, stretch, stretch left, stretch right. And literally all I did was raise the eyebrows to max, raise the upper eyelids to fit that, raise the eyelid shapers, stretch the face. And then I saved it as the pose library. I made it myself. It's not my actual poses, but what it does is, so you see this pose right here. I like it. It's working fairly well. It's still my pose, essentially. But let's just add a little plus to it. So I'm going to take it and I'm going to blend on a little bit of stretch, right? And actually, before I do that, please undo. Okay, save, set a key. I'm going to blend on about 28% stretch. Boom. So you can see, again, these are still my poses. I made these poses. Look at that. I think this is very nice pose. Now, I would probably not do the mouth, right? So if I wanted to stretch it without doing the mouth, let's go ahead and just delete this pose. Let's just do the eye mask area, right? So I'm going to deselect the mouth. There we go. I still have the squash and stretch. Okay, let's just stretch the eye mask area. I'm going to go here and I'm going to stretch it about 30%. That way I still keep the smile. Look at the difference between these poses. And if you like it, you know, if you don't, you can actually also find an in-between. So you're like, okay, do I like this, this, or this? And I'm like, you know what? I like this a lot. So I'm going to take this. I'm going to delete these two. And this is now my first pose, right? And so I'm like, okay, so she's going along doing her thing. And I want her to do a take here, right? So she's happy. She's looking at her phone. She looks up here. She looks up here, and then she needs to go like, what? Right? So she needs to squash and then stretch. So I've got the pose here. Pose here. So here, I want more scared. So I want to blend on a lot more stretch. And so I'm like, okay, which do I like better? The original pose or the more stretch pose? Well, as you can see, obviously, like I really like the stretch pose because it's like, what? Right? So it's using Pose Library to push your own poses with poses you created before you animated your shot. And so now I want to do that squash take, right? So here, I'm going to try doing my squash pose, right? So I'm going to squash it down to there. So now we have the squash pose, we have the stretch pose, and because I'm doing vanilla stretch, vanilla squash, my poses are still intact. It's literally the same. Like if I wanted to pose like this, it's literally just stretching it, but I still have this kind of a pose, right? So now it's going like wheat, right? And it's like whoosh. And I'm like, okay, this is coming down at the wrong time. So let me move this back 2 frames. It needs to start sooner. Let's try starting it a little bit sooner. And I'm like, okay, still a little bit sooner. Let's have it come up a little bit sooner. Hello, Ash Prim. Welcome to the stream. For anybody new here, I know we've got several new followers. This is a channel dedicated to animation, feedback, podcasts of animation professionals. This was started with me and my good friend Cynthia and my good friend Madison. I am an animator. I worked on Kane and Bridge of Spirits. I've worked on several other small projects. I'm currently at Luma working on some big feature projects. Cynthia is currently at Animal Logic. She worked for DreamWorks. She worked for, she was working for Jellyfish on a DreamWorks project. She worked at Axis for a little while. Now she's at Animal Logic. And then Madison, she worked on Kane and Bridge of Spirits with me. She worked on a dog short film that's going to come out soon that was working with some ILM and some Disney guys with that one. Luma is basically they're not specifically a Marvel client, but basically they work specifically with Marvel doing VFX for Marvel movies. So in the past, they've done Loki TV show. They did Tomorrow War for Amazon. I'm trying to think what else they've done. Basically, if it's a Marvel movie or any massive VFX movie within the last 3-4 years, they've probably done some on it. Because the thing with the VFX industry is it's becoming so large so quickly. These massive companies with these big 1,000-shot, 1,500-shot films can't find one VFX house to do all of it. So almost every VFX house is getting a percentage of a movie. And so like if a massive movie comes out, the really, really good shots go to ILM, the really good ones go to Weta, and then it kind of just goes down the tier. And so Luma is one of the bigger ones, one of the better ones. They're quickly making a good name in the industry. And yeah, they're taking a part of most of the big Marvel VFX alien movies that are coming out. So that's what I'm working on right now. So I think, so she's happy here. She looks up. I think she should go into concern here. No, that's not good. I'm going to go ahead and pull it back. I think the take is just too big. So instead of here, I'm going to go here. There we go. That works. I might even delay that a frame. There you go. So like, I'm not going to sit here and nitpick it, but like you get the idea. And again, like I'm saying, I would not do this on a layer. Some people I know do. I would do this on the base layer of my blocking. And then what I do after that is I think about connectivity of the face. Just like with the head turning, you have the head first, then the neck, then the body. The same as with the face. So if you have eyebrows, if you're going, whoosh, what? Eyebrows are going to lead. Then it's the eyelid crease. Then it's the eyelid. Both. I'm not specifically a rendering specialist. I do like rendering my shots in my spare time. I've used Arnold, Blender, both Cycles and Eevee. Unreal Engine is my favorite because I worked on Kana and we were doing everything in Engine because it's a game. So I really, really like Unreal Engine. Real-time rendering is amazing. Every VFX feature, anything in the entertainment industry is trying to pick up Unreal in one way or the other because it's so powerful. So Arnold and Unreal are both amazing, though. Arnold is a little more familiar to me. It's a little easier learning curve, but Unreal is where it's at. But back to what I was saying, the eyebrows are going to lead first, then the creases, then the lids, then you're going to have the cheeks coming down and, just offsetting things by frames. And then as the eyebrows go, when they come up, they're going to squeeze in and then come out as they come up. Or as they're up here, they're going to come out and squeeze in. So it's like boom, boom. So your eyebrows are going to be making arc and arc, right? So once I do my squash and stretch poses on the ones I posed, then I'm going to go through and arc things and make things nice and fleshy. And so she's shocked here. I don't want her to stay in this shocked pose too much because it's a little too much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 80% of that pose and I'm going to have that as an overshoot and settle. So she's going to go, what? Right? And so now what I'm going to do I can blend this back to my default, which would just be taking the stretch and blending it down. Or I could, again, this is why I do it on my base layer, because if I do a layer, learning Unreal Engine, animation. To put it this way, Unreal Engine is not going to get you a job as an animator. But will it increase your paycheck? There's a good chance that it will, to put it quite bluntly. Because it's also a good selling point to help you land a job. Your animation's what's going to get you hired, but if you know Unreal, that's a bonus, right? And because VFX, I mean, The Mandalorian, done with Unreal, of the live, massive Sky Dome thing they had. Games, all using Unreal Engine. There's a lot of feature films that are going into using Unreal Engine because you can get just as good in Arnold, but it's real time. That saves you hundreds of thousands, if not more, of money on render farms. So I have landed several jobs because of my Unreal Engine knowledge. Now, obviously, I was an animator first, and that's what got me the interview. That's what they liked. But whenever I said, hey, I know Unreal Engine 2, they're like, oh, let's hire him right here, right now, because it's a good skill to have. So will it get you jobs? Maybe. Like, it's a really nice skill to have. Your animation is first and foremost. But if you want to add an asset to your tool belt that will help you land jobs, Unreal Engine is really nice to have. So that's kind of my experience of, having landed several jobs that were helped by knowing Unreal Engine. So again, if she's here and she goes here, I'd like to squash it a bit. So it's like, right? So as she's here, it's like squash over, right? So I'm just going to take the squash pose again, squash it down. Maybe I even close it, right? Let's just see how crazy we can go with this. So it's like, right? That might be a little too crazy, right? Maybe I only want to go as crazy as this. But I do want the eyes to close. So I'm going to deselect the eyes because I like the fact that they're closed. I'm going to select this. I'm going to paste it. Oops. I'm going to set a key here. And I'm just going to drag this over here. Right. So this is my method, which again, I'll reiterate, I would do this on my base layer while I'm animating because again, you get into an animation layer and now all my poses are stretched way too far after this, which is why I prefer base layer. But I was doing this just for an example, but yeah, hopefully you get the idea though. So that's the way I would do faces. I would try that on this shot, try and get this nice fleshy eye mask. Cause again, Alan probably has the link already, but there's a drawing, I think it's 100 Tuesday Tips, where it talks about the eye mask and treating the eye mask of like almost like The Incredibles, where they've got that mask on. And whenever they emote, the whole mask expands and squashes. And that's literally all I'm doing here. I'm just doing it through a studio library instead of manually. But with that, it has been a 3-hour and 54-minute stream. It's 1:30 in the morning, and I have to work tomorrow. So thank you guys for showing up. This was probably the best stream I've had so far. We've had like 15, 20, 30 viewers average. I think we've had like almost 100 viewers overall. Lasted 4 hours. 6 people came and showed up for critiques. So let's do this every week. All right, guys. Thank you guys for showing up. This has been a blast. And I will see you guys next Wednesday or this Saturday for the podcast. Show up tomorrow for Cynthia's feedback. Madison's feedback is on Friday. And we will be doing a Q&A on how to get an animation job when you're coming from South America. Again, I won't have a lot to say, but I'll sit there and listen to the amazing animators. One from DreamWorks, another one worked at NPC for a while. Really, really amazing animators, and they're going to have a lot of good stuff to share. So show up to the streams, and I will see you guys later.